This conversation fits into our USC Dornsife Academy in the Public Square initiative, in which we're finding new ways to connect the ideas that we generate here in the Academy to the real world problems that we're facing in our community here in Los Angeles and around the world. Today's program is a shining example of the kinds of things that we can do with that initiative. And since here in America, all of our own political problems are solved and our government is working swimmingly, we thought we'd turn our attention to Europe. Political discord is threatening to pull the EU apart. Brexit was perhaps the clearest example, at least to us here in the United States. But there are surging political movements in Hungary, France, the Netherlands, and other places. Recently, the Catalonian movement for independence from Spain has been front and center. Separatists based in Barcelona and the central government in Madrid have clashed for more than a decade. This reached a boiling point last year when Catalans passed a referendum for independence. Today, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Pedro Sanchez, who plays a leading role in Spain's political arena and its struggle to find a solution to this crisis. As Secretary General of the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, known as the PSOE, he's known for guiding the grassroots voter efforts and promoting constitutional reform. His political career began in 2004 when he was elected a member of the City Council of Madrid. Dr. Sanchez went on to serve in the Spanish Congress of Deputies for 3 terms and was first elected leader of the opposition in 2014. Following a series of in-party struggles, he won re-election as Secretary General in May of 2017. Before entering politics, Dr. Sanchez worked as a political advisor in the European Parliament and in the United Nations during the Kosovo War. He's also served as a consultant to a European consortium and as a university professor after earning a PhD in economics and business from the Camilo José Cela University, a real celeb. Dr. Sanchez will talk with us about his vision of Spain's path forward, as well as broader issues of European democracy and political extremism. Following his remarks, he'll be joined by Professors Jake Soll, Bob Shrum, and Nina Rathbun for a panel discussion. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pedro Sanchez.
Good afternoon. It is for me a great pleasure to be here with you today to talk about what has happened in Spain with the Catalan issue. I want to thank the University of Southern California. I want to thank especially the Dornsife College and the Dean Miller, and of course Rob Shrum and his staff and the Unruh Institute for Politics. And of course, my great friend Jacob Soll for having invited me to come to this wonderful city of LA. The subject that brings us here today has attracted a great deal of attention, and I would like to take this opportunity to analyze its causes in the context of the rise of populism and polarization of Western societies. First of all, just a brief contextual note. Spain is a country of around 46.5 million people in the southwest of Europe. We are the 4th largest economy in the European Union and the 3rd largest economy in the world, just behind Russia. We are a country with a long history and a rich and diverse culture. 400 million people in the world speak Spanish. Here in the United States, around 50 million people. And we are also a country with high standards of living. Also, we are an advanced democracy. In fact, in prestigious democratic rankings like those of The Economist and Freedom House, the quality of the Spanish democracy is above that of France, Italy, or, if you would excuse me, the United States. Spain also is a highly decentralized state where its regions or nationalities have a great degree of freedom and autonomy. If you take as a reference, for instance, the common indicator to evaluate the degree of decentralization of the country, the level of subnational government expenditure, you can see in the graph that in Spain this level exceeds that of subnational administrations in federal states such as Germany or Belgium. Moreover, and this is very important, Spain also strongly guarantees its cultural pluralism. Spain, apart from Spanish, we have 3 official languages more, Catalan, Galician, and Basque, which are widely spoken and protected by the state. And what about Catalonia? Catalonia is a very important region of Spain. It has always been Spain. Catalonia was part of the Kingdom of Aragon, which allied through a royal marriage in the 15th century to the Kingdom of Castile. It is generally accepted by most of the scholars that the origin of the modern Spanish state can essentially be traced back to this marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castilla. Catalonia was also part of Spain when we approved our first constitution in 1812, and all other constitutions that followed. More than 90% of Catalans voted in favor of our current constitution approved in 1978. Catalonia represents more than 6% of Spanish territory, 16% of population, 19% of our GDP, and 22% of our industrial sector. In fact, as you can see in this data, Catalonia is also one of the most prosperous regions of Spain and of the European Union, having more GDP per capita than the average in the European Union. So in the light of this data, it is obvious that the experience of 40 years of Spanish democracy in the European Union has been very positive for all the territories in Spain, especially in Catalonia. Indeed, Catalonia, within the framework of a highly decentralized Spain, has also a great degree of self-government. They have their own parliament, their own elected government, their own police, and full control over most of the things that the modern government do for their citizens, for instance, health, education, and social protection. So, what happened? What are we actually talking about? What are the sources of this crisis? In order to give you an idea of the scale of what has actually occurred in Spain with Catalonia, please, I would ask you, please, to close your eyes for a minute and imagine the following events. I'm joking, you don't need to close your eyes. But please imagine that the Assembly of the State of California approves a referendum to separate from the United States that breaks de facto with the Constitution of California and with the Constitution of the United States. Imagine that even though the referendum does not count with the minimum democratic guarantees, and actually only around 40% of the population participate, the governor of the state and the Assembly of California, against the warnings of the U.S. Supreme Court, unilaterally declared the independence of California from the United States. Imagine that the federal government immediately reacts, restoring the constitutional order, while the governor of California escapes to Quebec in Canada, and other secessionist leaders are taken into pretrial detention charged with breaking with both the U.S. and the California Constitution. Think the crisis that this chain of events would represent for the United States, because precisely this is how the events have unfolded in Catalonia and Spain in these last months. But the most important question, and the question that I will attempt to answer today here, is why? How this could have occurred in one of the most prosperous and successful regions of Spain, which is actually one of the most decentralized countries in the world. How could this happen in a consolidated democracy member of the European Union? Why has happened? Of course, there's never a single answer. And I would say that Spain, with the crisis of Catalonia, or in Catalonia, has confronted a sort of perfect storm, which basically combines 4 different dimensions. First, Catalan nationalism deeply rooted in society, with more intensity in rural areas. Second, the eruption of an intense economic crisis and the social cuts imposed by the austerity policies. Third, growing political disaffection. And fourth, the rise of populism that is also common to other Western societies and that in Catalonia has taken the discourse and the promises of the pro-independence movement. The coincidence in space and in time of these 3 dimensions has given way to a profound constitutional and territorial crisis that requires, in my opinion, more than the mere restoration of the legal framework. In my opinion, it demands as well as a process of re-legitimization of democracy in Catalonia and Spain that can be addressed only through an ambitious program of reforms. But how did we get here? I have divided the historical development that led us here in 4 stages. 4 phases that led Spain and Catalonia from cooperation to rupture, that actually led from a plural but united Catalan society to a deep social division. The first stage would be the one comprised between the year 1977 and the year 2003, and I call it cooperation. After Franco dictatorship, you know that he was ruling the country for 40 years until he died. As I said, after Franco dictatorship, the prospect of a new democratic Spain and European Union membership worked as national and collective goals that unified our country, including nationalist Catalan parties. The Catalan nationalist political elite, in addition to ruling the region for more than 25 years, also participated actively in the development of the country's democratic architecture, our constitution, and contributed to its political stability through negotiation and agreement with successive central governments of different political colors. In fact, during these first 3 decades of democracy, the independence movement had little political and electoral relevance. But nevertheless, also during this time, this nationalist government reinforced a sense of Catalan national identity, largely linked from the Spanish identity that, without a doubt, laid the foundation for the eventual growth of the independence movement. The second stage would be the one comprised between the year 2003 and 2012, and I call it the stage of disaffection. Catalonia at that time tried to reform its, I would call it, regional constitution. This reform of this regional constitution was agreed, assuming the framework of the Spanish constitution and the rules of the existing territorial model. However, this new regional constitution became the first seed of division between Catalonia and the rest of Spain in the democratic period. This happens particularly because the Spanish political right, the Popular Party, had decided at that time to turn the discussion over Catalonia and the expansion of self-government into a political weapon against the social government ruling Spain at that time. They took, the Popular Party, they took the new regional constitution to the Spanish Constitutional Court, our Supreme Court, and 4 years later, in the year 2010, the top court invalidated some articles of the text that was approved by the Catalan and the Spanish Parliament, as well as through a referendum voted by the Catalan people. This sentence of the Supreme Court generated a climate of protest and frustration in Catalonia, and as a result, the political and social debate was colonized almost entirely by a message about identity. So the perfect storm was taking shape. This situation deteriorated even more with the global economic crisis that erupted in the year 2008. This recession had a terrible impact in the Catalan economy in terms of growth and unemployment, especially among youth. The third stage will be the one comprised between the year 2012 and 2016. I call it separatism. The regional elections and the celebration of a massive demonstration in Barcelona in the year 2011 confirmed that a strong separatist front with growing social support had replaced the previous predominance of moderate nationalism in Catalonia. As a result, in the year 2014, the Catalan pro-independence government organized an illegal consultation about independence, with no democratic guarantees, where in fact only the pro-independence half of the population participated. Similarly, the pro-independence front presented the regional elections of 2015 as a plebiscite in favor of the Catalan state. Again, pro-independence parties did not get a majority of votes, 48%, but thanks to the electoral system, allowed them to form a government and start to implement its program for the constitution of an independent state. In this chart, we can see how the support for independence has grown in Catalonia, but without becoming hegemonic. And the last stage will be the one that occurred last year, and I call it rupture. The growing radicalization of Catalan nationalism reached its climax between the months of September and November of 2017, when the independence movement proceeds unilaterally to the separation of Spain and the creation of its own state. In order to do so, Catalan pro-independence parties approved at the beginning of last September the so-called laws of disconnection. These laws were not only bluntly unconstitutional, but were also approved in parliamentary sessions full of irregularities and violating basic principles of parliamentary democracy. To begin with, the most important and undemocratic, they approved these laws without a reinforced majority that every parliamentary system requires for transcendental changes. Thus, they approved these laws with a simple majority when the own Catalan constitution demands 2/3 majority for its efforts. Secondly, they also abuse of their simple majority to deny the opposition the right to amend the laws approved. And thirdly, they ignore not only the Spanish Constitutional Court's decision, but also the reports made by lawyers of the Parliament of Catalonia, who warned of the illegality of the legislation submitted to debate and approval. You can see here the Catalan Parliament half empty, approving the disconnection law in September. Half of the MPs abandoned the Parliament as a sign of protest. In spite of that the referendum was declared illegal by the Constitutional Court, this was held on the 1st of October without the minimum democratic guarantees, as was highlighted by the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe. There was no public and verified census. The composition of the polling station was not previously made public. There was no electoral administration or judicial controls, and it was possible for the same voter to vote at several polling stations. Even so, the estimated participation, since it's not possible to refer to a truthful scrutiny, did not surpass 43% of the electoral census, and the affirmative votes for independence were around 38%. An outcome that showed something that is repeated in all the electoral processes that has been held in Catalonia during this last decade. The independence movement, either in relation to the parties that promote or indirect consultation, has never reached the support of a majority of Catalan citizens. Although it might be difficult to believe for an external observer
For pro-independence politicians, a referendum with no democratic guarantees whatsoever, and where only 38% of the census voted for independence, represented a clear democratic, and I quote, mandate to unilaterally secede from Spain. Based on this alleged democratic mandate, the 27th of October, pro-independence parties voted the Declaration of Independence of Catalonia in the Catalan Parliament, proclaiming that Catalonia becomes an independent state in the form of a republic. Only 82 of the 135 parliamentarians participated in the vote with the following result: 70 for independence, 2 blank, and 10 against. The rest of the political forces did not participate in an illegal voting in which the rights of the opposition had been violated. That is to say, the parliament declared the independence of Catalonia with 52% of its deputies. Independence is declared only with the vote of the parties that had the support of 47.7% of those who exercised their votes and 35.5% of the citizens entitled to vote in Catalonia. So the Declaration of Independence meant that, first, the Spanish democratic constitution and the legislations were replaced unilaterally and with no democratic legitimacy whatsoever, with a new and different legal order, and the legality of the autonomy of Catalonia itself was also liquidated. This was, above all, an attack without precedents to Spanish democracy and the rule of law. The institutional instability has had a terrible impact in Catalonia's economy and society at this final stage of the independence process. More than 3,000 companies have moved their headquarters in Catalonia to other regions of Spain, including 6 of 7 largest companies in Catalonia, loss of up to 35,000 jobs, decrease in GDP growth forecast from 2.8 to 2.1%, and foreign investment fell up to 75%. And secondly, this crisis has had a terrible impact in Catalan society. After being a fine example of coexistence for decades, Catalonia is today deeply divided. Well, here we have a picture of President Kennedy, that reminds us in 1962 the importance of the supremacy of the law in a democracy. Because the law is there to protect us all, and nobody can disobey it. Catalan separatists in Spain have been free and are free to defend or seek independence, but not to disobey the law. In the face of this attack, Spanish democracy had the obligation to defend democracy. What was the response from Spanish democracy? On October 27th, the same day that independence was proclaimed, the federal state proposal to take extraordinary measures was approved in the Spanish Senate. And in accordance with Article 155 of the Spanish Constitution, the Catalan government was seized, given its refusal to accept the democratic legality, and regional elections were called for the 21st of December. This was a legitimate instrument foreseen in the Spanish Constitution for the cases in which an autonomous community fails to fulfill its obligation. It is equivalent to instruments of different European constitutions of decentralized states, essential to make a federal law prevail over regional legislation. In particular, it is clearly inspired by Article 37 of the fundamental law of Bonn, the German constitution, as you may know. And its approval is fully democratic because it is carried out after debate and voting in the Spanish Senate. So the regional elections held on December 21st had some outstanding political consequences. First, with nearly 82% of participation in the elections, the political stalemate persists between two blocs, pro-independence and unionist. Although pro-independence parties didn't reach again the majority in votes, we have in Catalonia approximately 2 million citizens that want independence in the last 3 elections. And pro-independence parties took 47.5% of the vote against unionist parties that took 52% of the votes. In any case, due to the electoral law, the pro-independence bloc can govern through an absolute parliamentary majority. And for the first time, the most voted party in autonomous election in Catalonia is identified with the Spanish right. One of the major success of the pro-independence movement has been to develop a separatist narrative spread through a powerful propaganda machine supported by the Catalan government and by pro-independence media, academics, and NGOs. This pro-independence narrative is a simplification, or is a simplifying good and evil portrait, full of falsification and misrepresentations, where Catalonia appears as a sort of a colony, politically oppressed and economically exploited by an allegedly undemocratic and authoritarian Spanish state. However, Catalonia enjoyed the same civil liberties than the rest of Spanish people, and indeed Catalonia, as well as other more developed regions in Spain, contribute more than the poor ones to the state budget. However, pro-independence politicians pretend to turn solidarity between rich and poor into colonial exploitation. Furthermore, according to their vision, the independence process would be fast and clean, fully backed by the international community and with very low cost for the Catalan economy. They are using some narrative and expressions that I would like to share with you some comments. The first is the right to decide. The pro-independence movement claims that the international laws justify the self-determination referendum for Catalonia. However, as you know for sure, the right to self-determination is only contemplated by the United Nations in cases of, and I quote, particular situation of colonial domination or other forms of foreign domination or occupation. Also, independent Catalonia would be a part of the European Union, they proclaim. But statements made by different European Union authorities were clear about it, and I quote, if a territory of a member state in the European Union ceases to be a part of this state because it becomes an independent state, the treaties cannot continue to apply to the part of the territory, and therefore the new independent region becomes a third country. Also, they proclaim that Catalans want independence. Though secessionists claim to speak in the name of the whole people of Catalonia, election results over the last decade show that this is a baseless claim. You can see in the graph, for instance, how there is a correlation between social class and also geographic origin and support for independence. So, secessionist populism. During this, or its transition to secessionism, Catalan nationalism has somehow embraced the narrative and the forms of populist movements who have lately gained political prominence in Western societies. This variant of secessionist populism responds, in my opinion, to the same logic and shares similarities with other populist movements that have recently had a big political success. Here we will look how the Catalan secessionist movement shares some of the basic traits of modern populism. The first one would be the voice of the people. As you know, populism is always the voice of the people. The populist speaks for all the people, for all the country, and those who don't think like them, either they are not really belong to the homeland or become national enemies manipulated by foreign powers. Simplification and emotion. Make America Great Again, Take Back Control, were slogans that call for simplification of the reality and exacerbation of emotions. Simple solution to tackle complex problems. It's the essence of populism. Catalan separatists also constantly resort to simplification and emotion with slogans such as Spain steal us or we want to vote. As we have seen, solidarity with the poorest regions is not about stealing, and Catalans have been able to vote continuously in elections in recent years. Back to borders, the third message. It is about reinforcing walls to stop Latinos from coming to the United States. It is about to stop the refugees who escape from the war to live in the United Kingdom, or as in this case at hand, it is about building a border with the rest of the Spaniards. Behind this vision, there is indeed a supremacist element that we can also see in Catalan secessionist leaders. For example, the former vice president of the Catalonian government, independent person, wrote once that the DNA of Catalans was more similar to the French than to the rest of the Spaniards. And of course, anti-elitism. Populists represent the common people against the corrupted elites, even though independent Catalan elite had suffered many cases of corruption scandals during these last decades. And finally, plebiscite versus representation. Together with the attack towards political elites comes the denigration of representative democracy in favor of forms of direct democracy. Catalan secessionist populists presented the referendum of independence as a superior form of democracy in detriment of the Catalan parliament. However, for what we have seen so far, the referendum was an excuse to materialize their challenge to the Spanish democracy. And of course, post-truth and social networks. Catalan secessionism has massively resorted to the use of post-truth and social networks in the very same way that contemporary brands of populists have done so. And curiously, it seems that there is a role for Russia in this case as well, as it seems it happens with Brexit and with the US elections. So conclusions. Spain is confronting a serious crisis, but this is also a challenge to the European Union. The attempt of recession would break the principles of respect for the rules of democracy and territorial cohesion of the states on which the existence of the European Union is based. On the other hand, Catalan nationalism has culminated its path to secessionist radicalization through the glue of populism, and although it has achieved a very high level of mobilization, however, it has not managed to get the support of the majority of Catalans, nor the support of the international community. The response of the Spanish government has had a limited scope. It has reestablished the constitutional and democratic legality, but has not taken any real political step to solve the problem. The law has been restored in Catalonia, but we still have the political and social divisions between two blocs, the disaffection of a very important part of Catalan population in relation to Spain, and the political and economic uncertainties generated by independence, the independence movement. So therefore, unfortunately, the crisis is far from over. That is why my party, the Socialist Party, has a different vision of how things should be done. We have two main lines of reform. First, we need to perfectionate the self-government capacity of Catalonia and all the autonomous communities, and strengthening elements of cohesion and coordination between the states and its territories, which is the great deficit of the Spanish decentralization model. And also, secondly, we have so far forced the government and other political forces to join a parliamentary commission to evaluate our decentralization model, which would give way in 6 months' time to initiate the debate to reform the Spanish constitution. So I believe that representative democracy must show the flexibility and the capacity to find political solutions to the challenge put forward by polarization and populism. In this case, by the Catalan Secessionist populism. In sum, we need to rebuild the institutional architecture of the Spanish democracy so it can regain the political legitimacy that will allow us to enjoy another 40 years of social progress and economic prosperity together. Because together, we can. Many thanks.
Thank you. And I think Jake wants to, oh, I thought you were going to begin with a question, but I'll start off. Jake Soll, Nina Rathbun. That was very interesting. And for a lot of us, I think raises some big questions. I have one, which I'll start with you and then we'll go down the table. Why have the parties of the left in Britain, France, Spain, and Italy, not to speak of Eastern Europe, not prevailed as vehicles for responding to and redressing the wave of popular alienation from what's seen as dominant power arrangements? Why does the left seem to be in retreat in Europe in the face of this alienation and the economic crisis that we're still living with the aftermath of?
Well, I think this is the question of the moment, no? I would say, Rob, that perhaps, well, I will give you some answers, some perspectives, not the complete answer, but some perspectives of this difficult question. I would say, first of all, that even though the left and right, let's say, politics, it hasn't disappeared, it's also true that now we have another stage of politics, which means that the public debate is focused on open and closed societies. So in a way, identity is one of the key issues for politics today and for politicians. And when we speak about identity, it is true that for the left-wing parties, it's a difficult debate, because our debate is more, social cohesion, redistribution of the economic growth, and so on, and not identity. If we speak, in my case, about territorial cohesion or identity, for left-wing parties is always not our, let's say, our core to play. And the second one, I would say, regarding the Social Democrats parties in Europe, it is true that during this huge crisis that began in the year 2008, it is true that when we were in government, we could manage better the economic crisis. And somehow, when I became leader of the Socialist Party in the year 2014, many people, especially young people, believe that we have the same message, the same policies at right-wing parties. So this is why I think that we have to confront not only on social issues or political issues, but also economic issues with the right, and to show that there's a different path to solve the economic crisis.
Nina?
So I'm very interested in this conversation. Is this working? I think so. Yes. So I'm not a Spanish expert at all, but I have written about and done a lot of research on populism, both in Western Europe as well as Eastern Europe. And I think that to some degree we're using a term very loosely, and we're using it sloppily to try to define what's going on. And so, for example, if we look at Eastern Europe, you're looking more at a a protest, a feeling of not having the same kinds of opportunities without mainstream parties really responding. And so you see the names of mainstream parties in Eastern Europe, and you don't see a lot of support for them. Even though they received votes, there aren't a lot of kind of ties. In Western Europe, you see mainstream parties, again, losing votes to more extreme parties. And that has been going more on the right side than on the left side. In Eastern Europe, you see more extreme parties on the left as well as on the right. And I think that that's predominantly because of the rise of nativism, right? And this is the nationalist rise, which is more conducive to a right-wing party, to right-wing kinds of language and identification, rather than left-wing ones, which tend to be more socioeconomic.
Jake?
Well, do you want to let Pedro answer that or respond to that? Because my question is going to
Okay, good.
go from.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that you made a good point about populism. I think, as you said in the beginning of your intervention, that perhaps also new politics must understand new ways of languages and expressions on how to explain our solutions and our proposals. My party, the Socialist Party in Spain, next year we will have our anniversary of 140 years. So this history of the Socialist Party is the history of Spain. We suffered the dictatorship, we were in the Second Republic during the Civil War. During these last 40 years, we have ruled the country for over 20 years. So we were clearly the most important, and we are the most important political party in Spain. And it's also true that we have a problem with the young people, because they believe that we belong to the past but not to the future for the youth. And I think that we have to break that path. And for that, it is also true when I'm 45 years old. When I became leader of the Socialist Party, I was 42 years old. And I wasn't very aware about the meaning of becoming a leader of the Socialist Party in these difficult times in Europe for socialists. But it is true that one of the things, or the task, that I tried to manage since I was elected Secretary General of the Socialist Party was to transform inside the political party and the political culture and participation of my party. So I told Jake before, we were, with me as Secretary General of the Socialist Party, we were the first political organization in Spain, and I believe in Europe, to sign an agreement with Transparency International in order to increase the accountability of my party. And one thing that I realized when I signed that agreement is that now new politics is not to say what you're going to do, but to do it. Also, the things that you are defending for the institutions that you are willing to rule, you have also to implement it in your organization if you want to become, let's say, credible and gain credibility. Well, it's not to answer your reflection, but just to complement your reflection.
Jake, your question finally.
So the Catalonian crisis came. I mean, while it was, before it sort of happened, the Socialist Party was, I think, in some ways, in a more simple role as an opposition party on its way to really challenging the conservative, the Parti Popular in Spain. How has this complicated your task? Because now, on the one hand, you have this kind of identity-oriented movement, separatism in Catalonia. You've had to defend the integrity of the state. At another level, the government has been able to step in and do that, perhaps as much alienating the Catalonians, but also taking the role of the mantle of the protector of the state. So now what do? How do you both fight the government, but fight off populism at the same time? It seems like your mission has been complicated.
Absolutely, Jake. I would say one thing. Sometimes historically, if you think about Spain, one of the big, I would say, challenges of our democracy during these last 40 years, it was to combine decentralization with democratization. One of the failures of ancient governments, long time ago, not in this democratic period, but for instance, during the Second Republic or the First Republic, was to identify Spain as France. So to build like a kind of centralized government in a very plural country like is Spain. As I told you, in Spain we have 4 official languages. We have Spanish, but we have also Catalan, we have Galician, we have Basque language. And during the dictatorship, during all those 40 years, the political structure was centralized. And one of the achievements of our constitution was to decentralize and to create a sort of federal government in Spain. One of the risks that we are witnessing after what happened in Catalonia last year is that there's an increasing sense of reforming our federal system and try to re-centralize most of these policies, which I think is a big mistake, because historically in Spain, decentralization and democratization has been, a very virtuous combination. But of course, even though I agree that we have to defend our federal model, it is not called federal because federal in Spain has another meaning. It means in the public, let's say, imagination, like a kind of disgregation, not aggregation, like you can identify here in the United States. In Spain it's different, it's another meaning, at least not theoretically, but practically for many Spaniards. It is true that we have to ameliorate our federal system, because over these last 40 years, there has been many political trends in Catalonia that has been taking place because of, I don't know how to say it in English, but the misloyalty of the nationalist Catalans that were ruling the country or Catalonia for over 25 years. I mean, for instance, public media that was and is a propaganda tool for independence movement, and of course the education system.
How much has immigration played into this particular crisis, and how is Europe going to deal longer term with the waves of migrants and displaced people who are pouring into the continent? I mean, it's become a massive crisis in Italy.
But no, it's not linked. In the case of Catalonia, it's not. They're not using, let's say, the immigration issue for asking for independence. I think it's more, first of all, that of course in Catalonia they have a feeling of nationality. But secondly, and this is the most important thing, I believe, the economic crisis and the social crisis, explained by the austerity policy measures implemented by the Spanish and the European government.
Nina, you have any thoughts on this migration crisis?
I mean, it doesn't sound like it's related to the Catalonia incident. And so I would actually pose a separate question, which is, to what degree do you think that it is the European Union's existence that allows for the possibility of the the disaggregation of nation states, particularly ones that have already decentralized or have different national populations? Do you think that it's really an EU-created problem?
Well, I think it has common roots of on what is happening in Catalonia and what is happening in other parts of Europe, Poland, Hungary. There are kind of reactionary movements that materialize themselves in different ways. In Catalonia, because we have this identity, let's say, root, it has been materialized in a secessionist movement, which is, in the end, a reactionary movement, a regressive movement of with undemocratic behavior. And it is interesting because if you see what happens in the Brexit referendum, you see the youth and the young people voting in favor to remain in the European Union. But in the case of Catalonia, you see young people voting to separate Catalonia from Spain and also from European Union. So it's, I think, it has common roots, but the materialization of this reactionary movement is completely different.
But when you go up against the Parti Popular, will the migrant situation be one of the questions that you are fighting over?
In Spain nowadays, immigrants represent more or less 10%, 11% of our population. In this case, I would say that we are not. I believe that we're very solid. That there's a sense of solidarity with immigrants in Spain. Perhaps because of our history, because during the Civil War and after the Civil War, many refugees went to France and to Mexico and Venezuela and other Latin American countries. So there's no kind of xenophobic political movement, at least organized. And in this sense, I think that the Spanish political model and electoral, let's say, behavior of Spaniards is very positive. We don't have that that feeling, even though, because it is true that now we're not suffering the flows of migrants or migrants that Italy or Greece are suffering, or Germany. But it's also true that during the years 2004 and 2006, we suffered a migrant crisis of people coming from Senegal, Mauritania, and other countries. And at that time, the Socialist Party was ruling the government, the country, and we suffered many of the lacks and deficits that we are now witnessing at the European level. For instance, a common policy of the borders, a common refugee law at the European level, and common integration policies. But I think that from that experience we learned as society the suffering that these people were having coming to our country.
I want to go back to something you alluded to a moment ago, and we probably haven't talked about enough. We mentioned the economic crisis, but the policy of austerity prevailed across Europe, in Spain, for years and years, and still does in many places, for years and years as a result of the economic crisis. Has that fed both this movement for independence, and if I can use the word loosely, and I agree with you, it is used too loosely, this populism that seems to be threatening the integrity of Europe?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the common roots that you can find in the Catalan situation and in Brexit electoral behaviors of many Britons is that in the rural areas, most of the people support these political movements. Also in Catalonia, if you go to Barcelona, the capital of Catalonia, you won't see at least the importance that the pro-independence movement has in other parts of Catalonia. And to put you a clear example, one of the main civil society association that is working in favor of this pro-independence movement was created in the year 2012. In the year 2012, the political austerity was put in place by the Spanish government.
What do you think about the austerity, the impact of austerity on all this?
So I would also like us to remember that the austerity policies weren't selected by the Spanish government on their own. They were to some degree imposed upon them as requirements by the European Union, and not only on Spain, but also on Greece and Portugal and Ireland. So this was not, it was not just on Spain. And I think that, and please, I would love your input into this. I think that also limited the options that the mainstream parties had, which led to more disenfranchisement, or disenchantment, rather, of the population with the mainstream parties, and opening them up to the possibility of more simple solutions, which returned, not in Spain, but in other places, to nativist conceptions of the identity of the nation state. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about the restrictions or the requirements, conditions put on Spain for the austerity policies and its implication.
When I was elected for the first time Secretary General of the Socialist Party in the year 2014, Tsipras was campaigning to become Prime Minister in Greece. No? And it was very interesting because our voters, I made a lot of, let's say, qualitative studies to see where were the problems of our voters. And the thing is that they have mixed feelings. They knew that we must belong to this European Union, because European Union for Spaniards were mainly linked to positive ideas, democratization, social cohesion, opportunities, and so on. So it was clear for these our voters that one of the strengths of socialists in Spain was that we belong to a European family, okay, the Social Democrats. So they considered this as one of the positive assets of the socialists in Spain. But on the other hand, they were asking for another Europe. And it is true that if you go to the European Commission and the European Parliament, but especially the European Commission, is a combination of different political families, not only socialists, but also conservatives and liberals. This is the, let's say, the ingredients of the European Commission. So national voters, they don't see the difference when you speak about the European Union. You vote for socialists, you vote for liberals, you vote for radical left, or you vote for radical right. But then, when you speak about the governance of the European Union, you don't see that your political preference is materialized in different policies. I'm not saying that that this is the only explanation, but I truly believe that it's important to belong to a supranational family, but it's also important to materialize this electoral preference in the European Commission. And this is very important, and this is something that challenges the European Union construction nowadays. That is why, for instance, we are asking for a transnational list after Brexit. We are asking to unify the figure of the President of the European Council and the President of the European Commission. And that is why we are asking to have, for the next European elections, a common candidate for the socialist family. So, and in my experience, speaking about European Union, I live at that time the Greek crisis, is that not only in the socialist family, but also in the popular family and other families at the European level, always when you have to deal with European issues, first is the nation and then the ideology. So it's a complex combination and a complex equilibrium on how to deal with it, your national interest and your ideologic interest. And well, this is also, I think, an explanation on how we have lost some ground in favor of these radical parties that in the end, when they go to Brussels, they don't have support. They don't have political support because they don't belong to any supranational family. Tsipras now is an observer of the socialist family. So, you know, I don't know if I answer your question, but just to give you some insights of the experience that I get when I was there.
Jake, if you have one other thing, and then I'd like to get a couple audience questions before we conclude.
So, considering the economic constraints and considering all the challenges in Spain, what do you see your path back to power being concretely? And what's your strategy now, if you can talk about it in public?
Well, you know that the strategy, you never speak about your strategy, you implement the strategy. But I would say that there are like three main goals in Spain nowadays. And I think that this is common to at least Western democracies and especially European democracies. First of all, we have a big issue with inequality. Spain is, especially for a younger generation, not the first, but the second European Union country that suffer the highest inequality for younger generation. Secondly, I think that we are recovering, our economy is recovering, we are growing 3%, but it's not fair. I mean, it's not spreading to all the medium class in Spain. And thirdly, we have a problem of regeneration. I mean by that, you know, making all these reforms, territorial reforms, democratic reforms, accountability reforms that our country needs. So in a way, those are the three goals. Some people believe that this is a leftist, let's say, program. I believe that this is a fair program for my country. And I am, let's say, developing these three ideas through an intense agenda of policy issues.
It's remarkable when you put that map of California up. I thought it was a great, wonderful way of making people think about what was happening, but when you describe the challenges, the central challenges you face in Spain, they sound an awful lot like some of the challenges that we face here. I thought we ought to have a couple questions from the audience before we conclude. Sure. Oh, no, there's someone back there with a mic. That's great.
Hello.
And then we'll come up here.
Is it working? Hi. Hello, this is Julian Gutierrez, professor of Spanish in cinema here at the university. Thank you so much, Pedro. I have two questions. One is theoretical, and the other one is a bit more pragmatic. One of them is one of my favorite books, I don't know if you know, is Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism, where, of course, she is against nationalism. Nationalism is an exclusive, you know, par excellence, right? But she also says when she's working for the New Yorker, she goes to Jerusalem and she's, you know, witnessing, you know, Eichmann's trial. He says, I was following orders. and she says, well, that's why you have to think, because you have to think about the difference between justice and the law, and when a law, it may be unjust, and that's why, as humans, we have to think about that difference. So I just wonder if perhaps we may think that instead of that the solution is not through police brutality or an imposition of a law, that is a people that may think that is unjust. And, of course, we live in a state where we have to abide by the law. But it seems to me that whether the strategy is to seduce people through political intelligence as opposed through the imposition of the law. And because, of the deficit of the democratic deficit, which takes me to a very brief question which has to do with your political party was instrumental in implementing the wonderful law of historical memory. And I just wonder, how do you feel about the fact of aligning yourself with a political party which doesn't honor the victims of the Franco regime? Thank you.
Would you
No, I think we can
do another?
Yeah.
Okay, someone else?
Some students here? No, let's.
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll come back. We'll do 3 since.
So the monarchy in Spain has, since its reinstatement in the 1970s, been associated with the political right, if not with the Falange. Many Spaniards now see the solution to the Catalan crisis as the establishment of the federal republic and the removal of the monarchy. And in addition to that, the king has now shown himself to be allied with the Partido Popular. So isn't that now the perfect opportunity for the Socialist Party to say, we've grown out of a monarchy and let's move on to being a federal republic?
And over here, I promised these guys at the beginning, and there was no one there with a mic.
Yeah, so I know my question is similar to the first question, but I just wanted to ask you, in the past couple of weeks, like a Spanish newspaper, El Mundo, has been talking about just how Rajoy has been consulting with you about what to do kind of with like the Catalonian issue and Puigdemont. And like I just wanted to know like what other, kind of how that is working and how you're communicating with other political leaders in Spain, like whether it is the Partido Popular or Ciudadanos, and even with Felipe VI, like how that communication is going and trying to find an issue to that, to the issue.
Okay, we can have a dozen questions, but we're going to stop and let you respond.
Well, most of the questions were reflections on not only the Catalan situation, but the Spanish situation. In my opinion, it is true that even inside the party, when I decided to defend not the government but the constitution, we have an internal debate. No, well, perhaps we take the risk to seem to be very similar or very close to the Popular Party. No, and of course the Popular Party that you mentioned, no? And with the characteristic that you said, no? But I mean, as I said in my presentation, our constitution was approved in 1980 and 1978. The 4 political parties that now are, competing, so to say, in our political system, at least at national level, there's only one political party that remains from that time, which is the Socialist Party. Podemos didn't exist, Ciudadanos didn't exist, and the Popular Party was, the name of Popular Party was another at that time. So in a way, I believe that what we have done as socialists is an exercise of coherence with our history, because we are the only party that remains from that political period. And we were also the architects of our constitution.
a constitution that combines decentralization with democracy. So in a way, if I don't, as leader of the Socialist Party, defend the constitution, I'm betraying the history of my political party, and of course I'm giving the flag of the constitution to the Popular Party. I don't know if I answer your question. So in a way, it is not a question of right and win. It's a pre-political question. It's how you we are defending the essence of Spain, which is something pre-political, not ideological. I disagree with the Popular Party about how they see Spain, how they believe is Spain, but it's Spain. I don't know if I answered to your question. Well, the monarchy, this is something that, of course, the colleague asked me. I would say it is not. It is perfectly compatible to have a federal system with a parliamentary monarchy. I think that the debate will be not if we have a republic or a parliamentary monarchy, because I think that the parliamentary monarchy has functioned very well during these 40 years. But to achieve this territorial reform that we need, no? And the last question, I think it was more like a reflection. I would tell you that I have communications with all leaders. I try to speak with the new leaders, with, of course, the Prime Minister, and of course with nationalist leaders. I think that's my job. We have to speak a lot, we have to open a room for dialogue. I think this problem can be solved perfectly, and the only thing that we need is to have political willness. It will last, or it will take us many years. I think we're handling a problem that will be solved in many years, but we have to start and begin to solve the problem. No? That is why the agreement that I achieved and I reached with the Popular Party of reviewing during these first 6 months of the year our territorial model, and then open the debate for a constitutional reform, I think is one of the solutions to the territorial crisis that we're suffering. In a way, to challenge and to battle against this reactionary movement is also to propose a new regeneration program of reforms to all Spaniards. So it's not answering especially the secessionists, but also to propose to the Spaniards a new transformation, so to say, a new evolution.
Right. I'm going to conclude with a few thank yous to Jake, without whom this event would not have happened, to Nina for being here, to the staff of the Institute who worked very hard on this program, to Dean Miller, who brings an extraordinary vision to this campus, and I can personally say that without her, much of what we do would just not be possible. To all of you who've shown an interest in this, and most of all, to Pedro Sanchez, the leader of the Socialist Party in Spain. And I have one last question for you.
Okay.
If you're Prime Minister, will you come back and spend an evening with us?
Of course, but if you invite.
Thank you all very much.